In 2002, FIFA did something it had never done before. Instead of choosing one country to host the World Cup, it chose two, Japan and South Korea, sharing the tournament across 20 stadiums, two governments, two languages, and two very different ideas about what the event was supposed to leave behind. It was called a historic partnership. What it actually produced was 20 years of two countries quietly dealing with the consequences of a decision that was made for political reasons and paid for with public money. The 2002 World Cup used 20 stadiums across two countries, 10 in Japan, 10 in South Korea. Both nations built new venues specifically for the tournament. Both nations made promises about legacy. Both nations are still living with the results of those promises, though in rather different ways. The gap between Japan's experience and South Korea's is, in itself, a kind of case study in how context shapes outcome. The tournament itself was extraordinary. South Korea reached the semi-finals, the first Asian team ever to do so, defeating Spain and Italy along the way. The streets of Seoul filled with millions of people watching on outdoor screens. It was genuinely historic, and for South Korea in particular, it created something real, a national moment that a generation still remembers. The question is what the stadiums that hosted that moment look like today. Seoul's World Cup Stadium is one of the genuine success stories of this entire series. The city built a shopping mall, a cinema complex, a hotel, and an outdoor performance space directly integrated into the stadium structure. The venue hosts K-League matches, concerts, and community events year-round. It became a destination in its own right. Seoul understood something many other host cities didn't. The stadium alone was never going to be enough. Not every South Korean venue found the same path. The Incheon Stadium struggled for years with low attendance and high maintenance costs. The city doesn't have a top-tier football club capable of filling a 40,000-seat venue on a regular basis. It's a pattern that repeats itself regardless of which country is hosting. The stadiums built for cities that already had football culture tended to survive. The ones built for cities that didn't have it rarely did. Japan's situation is more complicated than South Korea's, and in some ways more honest about the fundamental problem. Several of the Japanese venues were built in cities and regions that had no existing top-flight football presence. Niigata is a coastal city known for rice and sake, not football. The stadium there is a striking building surrounded by rice fields. Getting people to fill it consistently has been a challenge that the city is still working through more than 20 years later. Sapporo solved the problem with engineering. The Sapporo Dome has a retractable natural grass pitch that floats on a cushion of air and can be moved entirely inside the building, allowing the venue to switch between football and baseball configurations. It's one of the most technically sophisticated stadiums in the world, and that sophistication gave it a flexibility that most World Cup venues never have. Sapporo didn't just build a football stadium. It built a machine. The joint hosting decision was made in 1996. And it was driven more by politics than practicality. Japan had been lobbying for the tournament for years. South Korea entered the race late and aggressively. FIFA, facing pressure from both sides and sensing an opportunity to expand the tournament's reach in Asia, split the difference. The result was a tournament that worked despite the complications, not because the structure was well designed. Some of the Japanese venues sit in places where their scale simply doesn't match the surrounding environment. Drive through certain parts of rural Japan, and you'll encounter a 40,000-seat stadium rising above rice paddies and small residential streets, a building designed for a global audience, planted in a community that never asked for it and isn't sure what to do with it now that the world has moved on. South Korea's broader economic trajectory helped its venues in ways that had nothing to do with football. The country's rapid development over the past 2 decades meant that cities grew around stadiums, creating the density and activity that venues need to stay relevant. When a city expands and modernizes, its infrastructure, including its stadiums, gets pulled along. Japan's situation was different. Many of the host cities were in regions experiencing population decline, which no amount of stadium investment was going to reverse. Japan is in the middle of one of the most significant demographic shifts of any developed nation, a shrinking, aging population concentrated increasingly in Tokyo and a handful of major cities. The regions that hosted World Cup matches in 2002 are, in several cases, places that have fewer people today than they did then. A stadium doesn't reverse that. If anything, it makes the emptiness more visible. A large, expensive building in a place that is slowly becoming quieter. The Oita Stadium, nicknamed the Big Eye for its distinctive oval roof design, is one of the more visually striking venues from 2002. It sits in a relatively small city on the island of Kyushu, and like several of its counterparts, it has struggled to find consistent use. The architecture draws attention. The location limits the audience. It's a tension that no amount of good design fully resolved. The final was played in Yokohama. Brazil beat Germany 2-0, with Ronaldo scoring both goals in what was his personal redemption after the 1998 final. Yokohama's stadium already existed before 2002 and was renovated for the tournament. It continues to function as one of Japan's primary football venues. The Yokohama story is the easier one to tell. A city that already had the infrastructure, the population, and the football culture to sustain a major venue. The harder stories are the ones that don't end that way. The contrast between the two countries' experiences isn't about which one did things better. It's about context. South Korea's urbanization, its football culture, its economic growth in the years following 2002, these created conditions where stadiums could find a second life. Japan's demographic reality, its regional population patterns, its relationship with football as a relatively newer sport, these created different conditions. The same tournament, the same investment model, two very different outcomes. South Korean football has grown significantly since 2002. The K-League has developed a genuine supporter culture. Organized fan groups, elaborate tifos, consistent attendance at several clubs. The World Cup didn't create that culture, but it accelerated it. The tournament gave South Korean football a visibility and a confidence it hadn't had before, and the stadiums built for 2002 became part of an ecosystem that actually needed them. Japanese football tells a different story. The J-League is a well-run, financially stable competition, but it operates in a country where baseball and other sports compete strongly for attention and where regional population decline limits the potential audience in many cities. The stadiums from 2002 are maintained. They're used. But the gap between their capacity and their typical attendance is a quiet, persistent reminder of the optimism that built them. Beyond the main stadiums, 2002 left behind dozens of training facilities, team hotels, and support venues across both countries. Some of these found uses. Many did not. The training ground where a national team prepared for matches that people still talk about is now, in some cases, an overgrown field with rusted goalposts and no one around to remember what happened there. The 2002 World Cup was the first held in Asia. It was the first shared between two nations. It produced one of the most surprising results in tournament history and some of the most memorable football of that era. It also left behind 20 stadiums in two countries, each navigating its own version of the question that every host eventually faces. The difference is that in 2002, that question had to be answered twice, in two languages, across two seas, by two governments that had never really agreed on anything except that they both wanted the tournament. What they did with what it left behind is where the stories diverge.